Mr. Chair, I wish to state for the record, how else will you interpret her refusal to answer? How else will you interpret her refusal to take an oath? I think, Mr. Chair, the only reasonable interpretation on her gestures is that she refused to participate in the investigation or inquiry in aid of legislation that we are conducting. Secondly, Mr. Chair, about the notice of disallowance, we take cognizance of the fact that this is not yet final and executory. As a matter of fact, the COA commented that the OVP has a period of 180 days, equivalent to 6 months to solicit to make an appeal for the purpose of seeking for a possible reversal of the ND. However, Mr. Chair, kapag ba may ND, bawal na bang malaman ito ng publiko? Kapag ba may ND, bawal na bang imbestigahan ito? And it is on this light that I invoke that public office is a public trust, and at all times, we are accountable to the Filipino people. In response to his comment about the possibility of the ND being reversed, I think I made a manifestation already in the last budget briefing of the DepEd. If in the event that the ND is reversed, in spite of having this inquiry already, the COA is not precluded. The COA is not prevented from sharing to the Filipino people that the OVP was able to justify, and therefore we are reversing the ND. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I wish to emphasize that there is no law which prevents the Congress, which prevents the COA from discussing, deliberating on the subject matter of the notice of disallowance. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I still have a question?
I will give you 1 minute.
Para lang po sa understanding ng mga Pilipino, pwede po bang pakidistinguish in layman's term, confidential fund from regular fund in 2 aspects. One is procurement, second is liquidation. Because we've been discussing about CF, confidential fund. The question is, naiintindihan ho ba tayo ng mga Pilipinong mamamayan? Now, I think it's high time for us to explain, COA, ano po ba ang diferensya o pagkakaiba, confidential from regular, with respect to one is procurement and second is liquidation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
COA, any representative from COA? Yes, Attorney Camora.
As to the confidential fund, it refers to a lump sum amount provided to NGAs, LGUs, and COBs for their confidential expenses, which expenses pertain to or are related to surveillance activities in civilian government agencies that are intended to support the mandate or operations of the agency. The audit of the confidential fund is based on the...
Can we explain on the process of procurement or disbursement? You said it is a lump sum fund. May procurement process po ba kapag confidential fund?
Since it involves confidential activities,
There is none.
There is no procedures on procurement.
No compliance to procurement law is necessary for confidential fund.
Yes,
There
Madam
is no
Chair.
posting, there is
Chair.
no bidding. Tama po ba?
Tama po, Mr. Chair.
And with respect to the regular fund, we have to comply. In other words, the law on procurement and bidding has to be followed. Tama po?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yes po, tama po.
Yes. Now let's go to liquidation. Ano pong diferensya ng confidential fund with the regular fund in terms of liquidation?
Mr. Chair, yung sa liquidation ng confidential fund is provided for under the joint circular. So, hindi po necessary na sinusunod namin yung sa regular fund.
Summary and in layman's term, ma'am, how do you make it more understandable for the Filipino people? Pagdating ng liquidation, distinguish natin CF from regular fund?
Mr. Chair, sa liquidation po ng CF, kung ano po ang required ng joint circular na documents to be submitted, yun po yung kailangan nilang isubmit, otherwise deficient yung liquidation nila.
Which is less compared to the regular fund.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Way
Mr.
less
Chair.
than the requirements for the liquidation of regular fund.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
In short, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, ano po ba yung mga requirements sa regular fund for purposes of liquidation na hindi nyo hinihingi sa confidential fund? In brief lang po.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I am only aware of the requirements ng sa confidential, so may I ask the help of ano?
Mr. Chair, may just manifest my request that I hope to hear a very
Maybe-
clear explanation from the
Maybe we
COA
can,
on our next hearing.
maybe we can address that question to the state auditor,
Yes, Mr.
Attorney
Chair.
Tomawis. Would you like to respond to the query of the Honorable Luistro?
Mr. Chair, for the information, for the regular fund, for the liquidation of regular fund, it is subject to the COA circular wherein there is a documentary requirements required to be submitted. Then for the confidential fund, I have no exact information because it is based on the another joint circular. So there are two circulars to be required to be complied with. The COA circular, which is the documentary requirements for regular audit or for the regular transactions, and for the confidential fund, there is that joint circular that must be complied with.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect to the COA, this representation is not satisfied with the answer. So may I request for a better and clearer explanation on how we distinguish CF from regular fund in terms of procurement, that is one, and in terms of liquidation, that is two. We will be looking forward, Mr. Chair, to listening to the discussion and explanation of the COA on our next hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
The
Mr. Chairman,
Honorable Vice Chair Acop.
may I just ask some clarification which is connected with the questions of the Honorable Luistro?
With the indulgence of the Honorable Junicio, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I know from COA or from DBM, doon po sa mga GA natin, magkahiwalay po yung provision ng intelligence at sa confidential funds. Di po ba? Would you agree with that?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. So, bakit po magkaiba? Bakit may separate provision yung intelligence fund, may separate provision yung confidential fund?
Attorney Camora, please respond.
Mr. Chair, saga din po yung difference actually po, which is ang intelligence fund po ay refers to those intelligence information gathering of uniformed and military personnel, and it has something to do with national security, while sa confidential expenses is for the civilian government po.
Specifically for what?
That are intended to support the mandate or operations of the agency.
Now, may I know if they are also required to submit reports of the utilization of these funds?
Intel funds po,
Both
Mr. Chair.
funds.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
To whom should they submit reports regarding their utilization?
Mr. Chair, as to the confidential funds, they need to submit for NGAs to the President of the Philippines, the Senate President, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and to other agencies to the Department Secretary. As to the Intel Fund, they submit their accomplishment report to the President of the Philippines.
Now, may I know what agency would look after the reporting of such sino po ang tumitingin kung ito'y nako-comply? Because I think this is part of the GAA, and the GAA is a law.
Mr. Chair, it is part of the required documents that they have to submit.
Sino po ang tumitingin na dapat nako-comply ang mga ito? Which agency of government? Kasi lahat po ng GAA may provision tungkol sa intelligence fund at saka confidential fund. It is always part of the GAA regarding provisions for the utilization of such. Di po ba? Oh, so sinabi nyo, it is required that they should submit reports. But who looks after the compliance of these agencies concerned?
Is it not the audit of the COA po?
It is also not the jurisdiction of DBM.
Mr. Chair, I think if it's on the utilization of funds, it's more on the COA.
Kaya nga po, it refers to intelligence and confidential funds. May reportorial requirements po ito. Now, who looks after the compliance of such?
Mr. Chair, kung yung sa liquidation po, sa COA po siya nagpupunta, yung reports po. And then, yung sa reporting agencies, it's the accomplishment report po of
Kayo
the
po
Intel and
nagsabi
Confidential
kanina
Fund.
na yung confidential fund, the reports must be made to the President of the Republic of the Philippines, doon po sa Senate President representing the Senate, at saka yung Speaker of the House representing the House. So, how do you determine whether this is complied with?
Part of the required documents is a proof of submission to the above agencies.
So, kayo,
Yes po, Mr. Chair.
kayo pala ang may jurisdiction nito na nagsasubmit sila ng mga reports in compliance with the provision of the GAA.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Kaya po, it's one of the required documents, yung proof po of submission.
No, nagpakalayo-layo pa tayo, madam. Kayo pala eh. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you po. The Honorable Senior Deputy Speaker
Thank you,
is
Mr. Chairman.
recognized for his manifestation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and fellow members of this 19th Congress and this good government and public accountability.
Boss.
As an ex officio member of this committee on good government and public accountability, please permit me the liberty to state that the legislative inquiry undertaken by this committee forms an integral part of its power to conduct legislative inquiries in aid of legislation. And in this case, as it relates to the exercise of the power of the purse of Congress itself, the Vice President, as an invited resource person, unfortunately refused to take an oath to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth before this committee. We have allowed the same only in this particular instance. In deference and with utmost respect to the office of the Vice President. Mr. Chairman, we also underscore that refusal to take an oath before this committee or any legislative hearing in Congress should not be considered as a precedent, as it goes against the power of Congress to conduct legislative inquiries under Article 6, Section 21 of the Constitution, as discussed in the case of Arnold versus Nazareno. This power of inquiry is coextensive with the power to legislate. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable The Honorable Valeriano is, before I recognize the Honorable Marcoleta, just a quick manifestation with the indulgence of Honorable Marcoleta, quick manifestation of the Honorable Congressman Valeriano. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in relation to the manifestation of Senior Deputy Speaker Gonzales, ito pong committee hearing natin ay initial deliberation and preliminary determination of my privilege speech last September 3. Partly nung speech ko po, and I quote again, hindi pera ng pangalawang Pangulo ang Office of the Vice President budget para sa 2022, 2023, 2024 at 2025. Pondo ng bayan yan. At yung iba po, pagkakataon na sana niyang patunayan sa Kongreso at sambayanan kung sino ang naging beneficiary ng kanyang mga socio-economic programs. At doon po, nilagay ko rin sa kanilang 2025 budget proposal, mayroong 977,615 beneficiaries at meron ding 793 strategic partnership noong 2023. Ako po ay natuwa kanina sa pagdating ni Vice President dahil ang buong akala ko ay masasagot niya yung katanungan ko sa privilege speech. Subalit, sa pagtanggi niya po ng pag-take ng oath at halos hindi niya rin po sinagot ay nakakalungkot din po. At asahan po ninyo na kung sakali man na maging maayos ang kinalabasan ng COA findings, ako po ay nakahanda ulit na tumayo at magsalita ulit kung ano man ang magiging rekomendasyon ng Commission on Audit. Salamat po, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The Honorable Marcoleta is now recognized for his interpellation.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, sasamantalahin ko na po ang presence po ng mga kinatawan ng Commission on Audit. Gusto ko po sanang itanong mula sa kanila, ano-ano pong mga opisina ng ating pamahalaan o ahensya ang pinagkakalooban po ng intelligence and confidential funds?
Attorney Camora, please respond.
Confidential funds are given to NGAs, to LGUs, and some GOCCs po.
You can elaborate, Madam Representative, sino po sa mga LGUs ang binibigyan po ng intelligence and confidential funds?
Sa LGUs po, depende po sa LGU, sa POP po nila, Mr. Chair.
Hindi po ba yung mga opisina ng mayor ay nakakatanggap ng intelligence and confidential funds?
As long as it is part of their budget, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
Kaya nga po tinatanong ko sa inyo, kayo po nakakaalam kasi kung sino-sino sa kanila. Karaniwan po yung opisina ng mayor, nakatatanggap po, maaaring hindi lahat, ngunit nakatatanggap po basically yung opisina ng mayor. Tama po?
According to the joint circular po, LGUs whose peace and order is a priority concern, sila po usually yung nag-allocate ng confidential funds.
Kaya nga po, base po sa record ninyo, may mga mayors po, opisina ng mayor ang nakatatanggap ng confidential and intelligence funds. Kasi po kayo ang nag-o-audit eh.
Yes po, Mr. Chair.
Para hindi na tayo magtagal, ganun lang kasi. Pati po, opisina ng gobernador, nakakatanggap din po ng ganung klaseng pondo, hindi po ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yun pong PNP, nakakatanggap po.
Intelligence fund po sa
Opo,
PNP.
yung AFP, nakakatanggap po.
Yes po, Mr.
Ang
Chair.
opisina po ng ating Pangulo ay nakakatanggap po ng intelligence funds.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Ngayon po, sa mga karamihan po ng opisina ng mayor at opisina ng gobernador at alimpang mga LGUs, na maaaring makatanggap nito, depende sa kanilang pangangailangan. Yung AFP at saka yung ating kapulisan at ang ating ang opisina po ng ating Panguluhan, masasabi po ba ninyo na merong na-issuean po ng notice or notices of disallowance sa napakaraming opisina na tumatanggap ng ganitong pondo?
Mr. Chair, pagka meron naman pong mga ibang agencies na katanggap
Kaya nga po
ng
gusto ko pong malaman, halimbawa 2022 at saka 2023, ballpark figures lang po, ilan po sa mga official, sa mga opisina ng mayor na nakatanggap ng confidential or intelligence funds ang subjected to notices of disallowance? Ilan po sa opisina ng gobernador, ganun din po yung tanong. At saka sa iba't ibang mga opisina po, para malaman lang natin, kahit ballpark figures lang, ilan po yung na-issue nyo na notices of disallowance concerning these types of funds?
Mr. Chair, wala po kaming data on the said information today because we only have data on the OVP po. I cannot give an exact number po
Bakit
today.
po? Kasasabi nyo lang na meron din kayong sinubject sa notice of disallowance eh. Bakit po yung opisina lang ng OVP ang meron kayong record?
Yung hawak po namin ngayon, Mr. Chair, since ito po yung subject ng inquiry, we are prepared as to the OVP. Pero as to other
O sige po,
agencies-
ganito na lang. Meron po ba kayong estimated na bilang ng na-issue nyo na kayo po kasi pag intelligence and confidential funds, kayo po yung auditing unit ang nakatoka para tingnan po ang pagkakagasta ng tipo ng fondong ito. Tama po?
Tama po, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Makapagsasabi po ba kayo ng estimated number? Ito po, kinabibilangan ng opisina ng mayor, ng gobernador, ng ISAP, ng kung ano-ano, ng siguro po, maski National Intelligence Security Council, AFP, ang kapulisan. Can you provide us a ballpark number of the notices of disallowance that your office has initially issued?
Mr. Chair, I cannot give you a ballpark figure now since hindi naman po ako involved sa entire ICFAO. So,
Wala po bang isa sa inyo na nakaupo ngayon sa aming harapan ang makapagbibigay man lang ng estimated number? Napakarami po ng mayor, napakarami po ng gobernador.
precisely, sir, kaya sa ibang division, wala po akong...
Pwede ba natin sabihin 100 or 500 notices of disallowance?
I cannot say po, Mr. Chair.
How can you help us? We are supposed to be doing this in aid of legislation. Kaya namin kayo pinatawag para tulungan nyo kami.
Mr. Chair,
Ang sabi po ng jurisprudence, which was quoted by no less than the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Reynato Puno, quoting various jurisprudence. Kasama na po yung Arnold versus Nazareno. There should be a legislative purpose. That's number one requirement. The number two requirement, there should be pertinency in relation to those legislative purpose. Kaya po
Congressman Marcoleta,
tinatanong
you
ko,
have 1 minute.
tinatanong ko po ngayon, gaano karami, o sige ganito na lang, marami ba ang na-issue nyo po na notices of disallowance in connection with these types of fund?